As Crystal, we acknowledge the Caddo, Quapaw, and Osage, as well as the many indigenous caretakers of this land and water. We appreciate the enduring influence of the vibrant, diverse, and contemporary cultures of indigenous peoples. We are conscious of the role in colonization that museums have played. As cultural institutions, we have a responsibility to engage in the dismantling of historical and systemic invisibility of indigenous peoples past, present, and future. We choose to intentionally hold ourselves accountable to appropriate conversation, representation, connection, and education to facilitate a space of measurable change.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Jill Wager, Deputy Director of Crystal Bridges, and we are so pleased to welcome you here on this beautiful day to celebrate fashion in America. We have some great conversations ahead for you. I want to give you a couple housekeeping notes that you may enjoy. There's food and beverage outside in the south lobby for you to enjoy, and facilities are just down the hall. We welcome you to come and go today as you please, as our speakers are talking. It is my pleasure to introduce Olivia Walton, Board Chair of Crystal Bridges, and Stephen Kolb, the CEO of CFDA.
I was asking Jill if I should sit, because if I sit, I might not be able to get up. Stephen, please. One of our guests of honor, have a quick seat. But I'm just here to introduce Stephen. It's so wonderful to have you all here. Who is here at Crystal Bridges for the first time? I love it. Who was stranded in LaGuardia for 7 hours yesterday? The Tossins, anyone else? I know. What a trooper, thank you. We are so thrilled to have you all here today and to be hosting our first fashion exhibition and to be hosting this fabulous symposium with the Council of Fashion Designers of America. Stephen, you and your team, I'm glad to just meet Sasha, truly have been delightful partners. I've heard that from everybody at Crystal Bridges. Thank you. We really appreciate it. So, why fashion in an art museum? Well, fashion is the art of our everyday lives, you could say. Fashion shapes how we see ourselves and how we see others. It is a powerful form of self-expression, and it is an important reflection of our culture. Today's conversations celebrate our exhibition, Fashioning America, From Grit to Glamour, covering 2 centuries of American fashion. And what I think really sets the exhibition apart is the approach that our curator, Michelle Finnemore, took to the exhibition. That's what really resonated with our mission and priorities here at Crystal Bridges, focusing on diversity, inclusion, and American ingenuity. After all, our mission here is to welcome all to celebrate the American spirit. I'm also particularly proud that our partnership with the CFDA led to a new Heartland Scholars Award. Our goal there is to foster new design talent from America's heartland, and applications open this January, if you know anyone. In our family, we like to say that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And my hope is that this award helps expand access to opportunity for emerging talent from the middle of the country. So today, we will dig into what this means in practice, empowering the next generation of female entrepreneurs, inclusive design, responsible luxury, the future of fashion, and supporting the next generation of diverse fashion designers. I like to say that our superpower here at Crystal Bridges is telling a more inclusive story of the history of American art, and that means of the history of America. And today's conversation is going to help us do just that. So please join me again in welcoming Stephen Kolb.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you everyone at Crystal Bridges. It's been a real honor and pleasure to build this symposium with you today. And those of you who know me know that I'm a very impatient person, so 7 hours at LaGuardia was tough, but I knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel, the exhibit, which I got a chance to see today, and is amazing, and I'm sure if you haven't seen it, you're gonna love it as well, too. This is my second time in Bentonville, definitely not my last, and I was here for Fashion Week as part of Interform, and I was so impressed with the and industry and the organization and what's happening in Northwest Arkansas in fashion. And I was actually surprised, but in a good way. I really admire the work that Robin Atkinson is doing with Interform. And Interform is part of a group program we have called CFDA Connects, which supports regional fashion organizations. And you guys really have one of the strongest groups in that network. And it's when I was here that Olivia and I met for the first time and at a fashion show. And as you do, you talk at the front row, and we were talking about what is fashion in America. And often it's easy to kind of be in a kind of, what do you say, like when you're just kind of locked in a box, right? You're framed in and think New York or LA.
A bubble.
But what?
You're in a bubble.
A bubble, that's it. And fashion is really more than that, and that's how we developed the scholarship, particularly for students in the heartland. And when we were putting together the symposium today, we really wanted to talk about issues that are in the forefront of our industry, like diversity, equity, inclusion, sustainability, circularity, gender parity. And so you really have an amazing group of speakers and panels that are going to share their experiences and their thoughts of what the future of fashion is. And I know that the scholars, the students that come out of the Heartland Scholarship that we're doing with Crystal Bridges are really going to continue that conversation as the future generation of leaders. I did want to just thank a lot of our CFDA members and friends who agreed to be part of today's panel. A lot of them, you recognize the names, but I really appreciate Stuart Vevers from Coach, Tracy Reese, a CFDA board member, Aurora James, a CFDA board member, Tommy Hilfiger, a CFDA board member, Omar Salam, and Felicia Noel, Fee, as we call her, are part of a program we have for young designers called the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund, sitting right over there. Beth Ann Hardison, board member, who's going to lead a panel with them, Ruben Toledo, and so many others. So thank you to all of them for coming to Arkansas and being part of this. I hope you enjoyed today's sessions and are inspired by the conversations we're about to hear. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Stuart Vevers of Coach and Nicole Phelps of Vogue Runway.
Hi, Stuart.
Hi, Nicole.
We were back there trying to figure out when it was we met. I think it might have been February 2001. In your early days, you were at Bottega Veneta doing accessories.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. It was my first season in Milan in Paris Fashion Week. And we might have met then. When I really feel like I got to know you was when Stuart landed at Coach, which we all in this room know very well, the American leather goods company, in 2013.
That's right, yes.
Yes. Well, that's almost 10 years. I can't believe it.
Yes, I guess I'm coming up for an anniversary, yeah.
Fashion loves an anniversary, so I expect we'll be seeing lots of exciting things. So just to let you all know a little bit more about Stuart, you've been in fashion almost as long as I have. I started in 1996, and he has worked in many different very famous houses all over the world, including Loewe, in addition to Bottega Veneta, including Louis Vuitton, including Luella Bartley, and did I miss anyone in there?
Givenchy,
Givenchy.
Calvin Klein. That was my first job after school. Yeah.
So many different brands. And since 2013, he has been at Coach. In 2017, you received the CFDA Accessory Designer of the Year Award, and you're nominated again in 2022. I'm
Yes.
rooting for you.
Thank you.
I'm rooting for you. Those awards are next month, I think 2 weeks from yesterday or the day before. So our subject today is American fashion and why American fashion matters. So let's start by defining American fashion. What would you say American fashion is?
I mean, I sometimes feel a little odd talking about American fashion because you'll quickly hear from my accent that I'm not. But I think sometimes when you don't grow up in a country, I don't know, you can have an outsider's point of view. And in fact, one of the things that most inspired me about joining Coach was to explore American style through the lens of an authentic American house. So what were those things that I wanted to explore? There was something about the ease of a certain everydayness, a sense of reality that really, for most of my career, I wasn't focused on. And when I got the call from Coach, I was actually, even though it was very different to the work I'd done before, I was super inspired to do something different. So I guess it's those differences that I was drawn to, and that sense of reality. At least that's what I've certainly focused on at Coach, about celebrating the everyday in a way. I think is something that is part of what the American fashion legacy is.
Mm-hmm. Well, the exhibition that we both took a tour of this morning, it makes a good point of that, right? That American fashion goes from grit, the blue jeans of James Dean and Marlon Brando, to glamour, the beautiful pieces by Halston and Tom Ford, and you name the famous American designer in there. But it's true that in fashion, sometimes American fashion gets a bad rap. We are practical, we are everyday, and you go to Paris and it's about fantasy and experimentation. But, what do you think of that? Do you agree, disagree?
I think, I mean, in a way, I think it's about celebrating those differences, that because one of them isn't better than the other from my point of view. I think it's just, working for American House, I want to celebrate the things that make it different. So to me, that is that sense of reality. But also, I think, to me, what's important about that is, I think it reflects how people dress today, honestly, all around the world. And ball gowns and severe tailoring just aren't how people dress most of the time around the world. So in a way, it's that probably that connection to reality that sometimes gets looked down on, but I actually think it's something to be celebrated.
Right, because the truth is that American fashion sort of is the world's fashion. Everyone has adopted sneakers, for example, as their daily footwear. There was a time in America where we all wore hats and gloves, and ladies wore pumps, and no one was wearing sneakers to go do their grocery shopping.
And I think those starting points, they've become the archetypes of American style, like the denim jean, the sneaker, the humble white T-shirt, maybe even like the biker jacket. They come from a practical place, often a blue-collar place, and I love exploring those references. I often say, even when we're designing a dress at Coach, we approach it with the kind of ease of a humble white T-shirt.
So when Stuart came to the U.S. for this job, you went on, more road trips than maybe any American that I know. Can you tell us a little about those explorations and some of the highlights, and maybe how you wove them into your Coach collections? Because Stuart not only designs Coach accessories, he also does ready-to-wear.
Yeah, so it was actually just before I joined Coach, I took my my summer vacations, and I actually, at the time, I couldn't drive, so I would take the Amtrak trains across country and spend 2 weeks traveling. And the first time I did it, I just loved it so much, I started to study what route I could do next. And so I did 5 years in a row, I did 2-week vacations traveling across the country. And what I loved was starting in the amazing big cities, but like getting off at sometimes 2 a.m. in some small town and spending 2 days exploring it. And I found it just so fascinating. And like I said, growing up in the north of England and watching movies and TV shows and pop videos, like everything I was seeing in a way on my travels was seen through the kind of a Hollywood glow. It still, the everyday felt so exotic and inspiring, and that really became, it was almost a 5-year-long research trip for my first collection at Coach, and I pulled all of those references and places I traveled to into those first collections.
And have you been to Arkansas before?
No. Is it on an Amtrak route? I'm sure it must be.
Well, it's my first time here too, and I know you've been here just about 12 hours or so, maybe 15 hours, but what is your first impression?
It's great. I mean, I arrived quite late last night, but one of the reasons I was really excited to come, Stephen actually said, I think you'd really enjoy this visit, was, I wanted to come and visit and see the town and explore a little. So even though we're here for a short time, I got up this morning, went for breakfast. We found out we'd been to the same place separately, so in the town square, and I walked here. So yeah, I mean, I started to think today I must plan a trip to come back and spend more time here and explore.
Well, let's talk about Coach and what you're doing there. As an American fashion leader, how is the company innovating? We've talked a lot recently about your efforts around sustainability, so maybe you can go into a little bit of that for us. I know that sustainability is a subject that some other designers in the room will be tackling later.
Yeah, sure. So it's something that I was passionate about. I was often researching, reading, thinking about this. And there were certain initiatives, a lot of initiatives around materials, etc., that we were working on. But I often saw it as the responsibility of the production teams, the people to make better choices, in the background in a way. And it was really during the pandemic. Well, I became a father during the pandemic, and it's a bit of a cliche, but it did create some deep thinking, and we also, like a lot of us, were spending a lot of time at home and a lot of time to think, and it just made me think about the impact I could make and the things I should be doing. It was a bit like that feeling of it's now or never. I knew this was important to me, but I also, I knew I wasn't doing enough, and I wanted to change that. So it can sometimes be an intimidating area because, that people are very quick to, you do one initiative that's positive, but they're quick to point out the things you're doing that aren't. But I truly believe we have to face this, we have to face those fears, and we have to put ourselves out there, because I think every small step forward counts. And what I've seen since I've put myself out there more with this is people start to come to me with ideas. People start to say, oh, I heard you talking about that the other day. Actually, I read something that's interesting you might want to hear about. Or I've got a friend who does this. And it all starts to gain momentum. And in fact, we show at New York Fashion Week twice a year, and I've used that as an area, not just to innovate around aesthetics and design ideas, but to every season, I challenge myself and the team to try new things around sustainability. And some, honestly, they don't go anywhere. They don't get any traction, but some do, and they become bigger ideas over time. So essentially I use it as a way to prototype, try new things, and encourage the team. Like, you know, there's no right or wrong answers here. We've just got to put ourselves out there and push forward.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be helpful for us to know a little bit more specifics about, like, what is an initiative that has turned out to be positive and you're sort of building on?
I think probably I was about to say the biggest, but I shouldn't think like that. Everything is important, but one thing we did when we weren't showing on the runway, we started pulling pieces from previous collections and updating them within the season to kind of challenge ourselves a bit of the norms of seasonality. And that led to now a program that has really gained a lot of traction. We call it Coach Reloved, and clients can bring back, we've now just actually recently expanded it to more categories. They can bring back bags, clothing, or shoes to a Coach store. We take that product back and we figure out a second life for it. So sometimes it's just, all we do is we repair it and we put it back out into the world. So you can shop these pieces on the Coach website. Sometimes if a piece is damaged, we'll customize it in a way that makes it a new one-of-a-kind piece. And then if it's really beyond repair, we'll actually take it apart and make something new from it. But I think that's a really important initiative, because I think it starts to make me realize is that everything we create is going to be our responsibility at some point. And we're trying to find creative, inspiring ways to keep those pieces in working in the world, and inspire people to come and explore them. When we put a new drop of Coach Reloved on our website, there's often a lot of enthusiasm about the new one-of-a-kind pieces that have been created.
Well, I don't know if how many people in here are very close to the fashion industry, but as a rule, I would say fashion, like the high fashion brands, have been very slow to embrace the idea of resale. Brands have thought that it might lower the value of their sort of virgin or original product, right? Was it hard to get the company, like the business side of the company, to get on board with this idea, or did they like this idea?
I think I think the important thing was we started small. We started small, and then it started to gain traction, and people saw that there was excitement around this. And honestly, I really think there's a genuine truth to this in Coach pieces. When I travel, whether I'm in London or Tokyo or just in Brooklyn in New York, I see young people carrying Coach bags that just happen to be 40 or 50 years old, because they last. And I think so. In a way, there was a truth within our brand, and now at the time, probably the biggest question was, is this scalable? How much of this can you do? So we have a repair workshop in New Jersey, and we've now shifted some of the resources there and actually hired into it to specifically around Coach Reloved to start to build more scalability. And now it's at a scale where it does start to become meaningful. So I think it's that thing around sustainability. What I've found to be important is it doesn't always have to be a big idea right from the beginning. You've got to let things build, because some things are going to work better than others, but it's just about doing it. I think we just have to do it. Like,
I have to say that my first designer bag was a Coach bag. The year was 1985 or 86 maybe, and I was in junior high, and it was one of those Bonnie Cashin bags with a zipper. And the thing that I remember so clearly is it was like $88 or $90,
right?
And that was American, a beautiful piece of American, leather made in the USA product. Can you talk a little bit about Coach's legacy and what Bonnie Cashin, who was a designer who created both ready-to-wear and bags for Coach, what she was good at and what she should be remembered for?
On my first day at Coach, my husband, well, my now husband, he wasn't then, gave me a framed picture of Bonnie Cashin. It was from the Baltimore Sun, I think it was, and he'd sourced it from their archived. And because I'd often spoke about her, and I see her very much as the fairy godmother of Coach. She, so many of the things that we recognize today as Coach, she was the one who created, and she was such an innovator and really, really playful with her style, and part of my role is always pushing creativity and innovation, and sometimes I get resistance, right? Sometimes new things are a little scary, within a large company, and I often will reference Bonnie Cashin because the things she did were so bold. It was a giant leap forward for what Coach became. So she's a real inspiration, both her work for Coach, but also the way she worked. I find very inspiring.
I think of her alongside Claire McCardle, another famous American woman designer who really emphasized practicality, right? The famous turnkey lock is a Bonnie Cashin invention, correct?
Correct, and a really fun fact is she pulled that turn lock from her open-top sports car. That was the closure of her open-top sports car, and she moved it first into clothing and then into bags.
Well, talking about new things, as you said, another thing that you have been pushing is diversity on your runway, and not just in terms of race and color, but also in terms of size. And we were talking about this when we were preparing for this lecture, that fashion oftentimes has a very, very narrow, as in literally narrow definition of beauty, but you're pushing against that. Can you talk about how the work you're doing around that with your casting director and?
Yeah, it's and actually I think it's something that is changing definitely at New York Fashion Week. Within American fashion, I would say it's definitely a place where it's being where it's actually happening compared to the rest of the fashion world. But it was again, I think it was another thing that came from some thinking during the pandemic, and we at the time we shifted from runway shows to lookbooks and film, etc. And as part of that, it just felt instinctive to cast people who I knew or were part of the Coach family as within that imagery, and then when we came to return to Runway, it was something that I felt it was very easy when we returned to Runway to go back to how we were doing things, and I was very determined to try not to lose all the things that we'd learned. So yeah, we started to cast a whole range of body shapes, and I think it's very important that it's not just the extremes. I think it's about celebrating all different body shapes, and I have to admit, at first it was a challenge because I just wasn't used to it. I hadn't done it before, but that's not a reason to not. And I think part of what's so inspiring to me about fashion is that it's always changing and it's always evolving. So this is just one of those things. It needs to change, and so again, so we just have to do it. And we've had conversations, and I've had conversations with Vogue as well about making sure we have different sizes available for shoots and things like that. And I think it's really important. We have to do it.
I agree. New York is definitely ahead of the game when you look at the runways in Milan and Paris. It feels like the any progress that had been made, it really sort of fell away this past season. I don't really know why, but you have a new spokesperson, Lil Nas X. Can you tell me how you chose him for this role?
I mean, for me, it's always instinct. Like, it's just, you know, like a lot of people, I was watching his work and was really inspired by it and was so, you know, it just felt very fresh. He, you know, and we actually started talking first about creating some pieces for the tour that he's doing currently. And it was, even though I really wanted to do it, it was quite difficult. Again, an interesting challenge because, you know, often his style is quite theatrical, quite big. And, you know, I spoke about Coach being quite real, quite grounded. It was hard to find the right balance, but I'm really proud of what we created together, and it's led to do more projects together. And it's really just because I'm really inspired by how he thinks, his work, and he looks great in Coach, so...
He did. He wore Coach at Vogue World, which was the fashion show that Vogue put on during
Custom.
New York Fashion Week.
Yeah.
Yes, he looked excellent. So you talked about how the pandemic has, has sort of drove you to think about change. I think that we all agree that we are living in, you know, quite challenging times, be it, you know, the threat of war in Europe, energy crises everywhere, on and on, climate change. There's a lot of sort of noise in the world that, and fashion, like, how does fashion compete? How do you think about making fashion that matters in 2022 and beyond?
I mean, one of the things I love most about fashion is that I think at its best it reflects the times we're in, and I think it's the most important thing is to listen to the world. Particularly, I think what's important to the next generation. I've always been inspired by youth culture, whether it's from today or from the past. I just think we've got to listen because they're challenging the whole world. They're challenging themselves to do things differently, but they're challenging the world to do things differently. And I think that's what I try and do is just listen and respond to that.
And how do you, like, where do you hear, I mean, obviously your children are 2 years old or so. They're too young to be telling you. I have a 14-year-old, he's telling me. But where do you feel like where are good places for you to get that information? You know, like when you're trying to figure out, you know, what the culture is telling you, where do you get your information?
I read. I'm actually really fascinated. I read a lot about, you know, whether there's pieces around, you know, the thinking of the next generation. I'm a bit of a TV addict and very much like American. So yeah, like a lot of us, I watch Euphoria for my information, and I don't know, that shouldn't be my only source, but it's still interesting. I think we actually do some quite real, like very practical things at Coach as well, where we have like groups of Gen Z people come in and talk to us about what's important. I haven't done it myself, but even some of the team have gone to people's homes for them to walk through their wardrobe and talk about what's important to them and how so we do quite practical things like that, and then just reading, listening, watching, you know.
Are you on TikTok?
I actually think I've registered. I think I've done one post. I think I did one post around the Met Gala, but yeah, I'm not. Yes, I need to. I must do better.
Yes,
yeah.
I am still on Instagram. I have not yet committed to TikTok. But earlier this week, I posted to Instagram that I was going to be here and that I was going to talk to you. And I asked people what they thought why American fashion matters. So I'm going to read a few of these, and you can just tell me which one resonates the most with you. These are the 4 highlights. It's the epitome of not giving a blank about about codes and rules. American fashion, this is number 2. American fashion represents freedom and change. Number 3, it's built on hope for a better, more exciting tomorrow. 4, it emulates the beauty of America. It makes luxury feel attainable and personal.
I think they all sound really good. I mean, those are words I use a lot. Some of those are words I use a lot at Coach. I think it is, I think, again, part of what drew me to Coach as an American house was that it was more welcoming. It is, people often will say to me, when I go in a Coach store, I feel really welcome. People, and it's often the opposite if they go to a traditional European luxury house. So I think those, they definitely resonate. I think, what was the second one?
American fashion represents freedom and change.
Yeah, because I think, like you were just saying, like New York Fashion Week, in terms of size diversity on the runway, body diversity on the runway has been, it's a pioneer. It's making the change happen, and sometimes it's happened often with smaller, up and coming designers, and it's people like myself who look at it and go, that feels right. That's, and I think what's very clear to me is the future is going to be that. So it's important to embrace that.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think we have time for one more question, which is something we've been dancing around, but let's ask it one more time. In what other ways would you like to build purpose into the Coach brand?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, it's something we've been talking about a lot. I think there's a lot of, I've talked about a lot of great initiatives that we're working on and things that feel important, but I do think today, I don't think it's just in fashion. I think creating companies with purpose just feel, I don't know, I'm not going to be very articulate here on the last question, damn. But yeah, it's talking about why you're here and what's important in the world, not just like, this is the product I create. And I think sometimes something that's often forgotten, I think, in fashion, because people often will look at the imagery and see, it's a certain coldness about the world of fashion, but I've always found it to be the opposite. And it's like, if you think of what fashion is, it often comes down to makers, people making things with their hands, so if you think of what I do, a big part of what I do at Coach, we work with a byproduct of the meat industry to hopefully to create something beautiful and lasting, that, and that magic of a designer and a maker coming together that's when the magic happens. So it's a kind of side way of answering that question, but even though that wouldn't necessarily, I don't know, there's a purpose in that, but it's, at the moment we're digging deeper into why are we here and why do our clients care about us. And one of the things actually we've been talking a lot about is courageous self-expression. It's something we've realized, especially talking to younger people. It's like that celebrating that courageous self-expression is something that feels really important to me right now.
Well, thank you, and it's great to talk to you
Thank
always,
you,
Stuart.
Nicole. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.